Jakovinka Britson is going to do in the 1500. He has time to look behind him. 20 years of age, and he is on top of the world.
But coming down for a maiden national crown, Cornwall is the champion.
Algarouz has run his race, or has he? Has he got anything left? Algarouz trying to get there. Kipchoge, the junior's there. Algarouz is trying to get to the line. Kenya wins it. Kipchoge takes
Vivian Chariot's turn. And what a proud moment for her and the Kenyans. The first woman from her nation to take the 5,000 metre title. Vivian Chariot's in Dreamland.
on the outside. Ollie Hall of Australia comes. Jake Whiteman has just spent. It's going to be Chariot and Hall. Who's going to get it? It's going to be Australia. The gold.
Riley Mcgowan has come from the clouds over the last few years and now holds a place within Australia's top half a dozen 800-metre runners. With a PB of 146.08, Riley, together with a bunch of other hungry Australians, are knocking on the door of true world-class status. We caught up with Riley right after his first World Champs in Budapest, as he settles down for some base training before the Australian summer season kicks off. Before I get into it though, a quick word from the sponsor of this episode, ASICS. Nothing feels better than the GT 2012 shoe. Stable, cushioned, smooth. Shop now at asics.com or look for the link in the show notes. I'm here with Riley. It's awesome to catch up with you. Whereabouts are you at the moment?
Thanks, mate. Super stoked to get on and have a yarn. Back in Canberra, which is home for me. Been back from Europe for about a week and a half, coming up to 2 weeks now. So slowly settling back into the real world.
You had we'll get to World Champs in a sec, but I was looking at, you raced a fair bit in Europe, hey, like first in the Czech Republic on the 13th of June. And then I think I was counting 15 or 16 races this year so far since you opened up in at Box Hill on the 24th of Jan. Decent number of races, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, when we were planning for what 2023 was going to look like, we didn't have the luxury of saying we're definitely going to be in Budapest. So we kind of had to run the domestic season like it was, no different to any other. Luckily, one thing sort of led to the next, and we could justify a trip overseas, and then things luckily continued to fall my way, and we were able to stay right through to August. So certainly longer than we originally planned, but at the outset we didn't have the luxury of targeting Budapest because realistically we didn't feel like we were at that level in November, December last year when we were planning out the season. Right. And so I see here, like, obviously you're pretty consistent. Like the slowest was a 150.34, but that was in a heat, so we can't really count that. A lot of 147s, a few 148s, 146, obviously your PB 146.08, I think it is. Another 146.29 in Austria. So a lot of consistency there. I guess the number of races and the consistent nature of the times is what led you to the start line in Budapest, right? I think so, yeah. I think I had 6 of those outside of Worlds. 6 of those races were over in Europe, and it was the first time for me. So that came with its own learnings. Racing on 6-lane tracks against 11 other people, just things we don't get to experience here in Australia. There were certainly some good opportunities that I feel like I missed over in Europe with some of those races. Opportunities that presented themselves, everything lined up, felt really good. Had some friends there and just didn't race the way I wanted to. So it would have been nice to have a couple quicker ones on the board there that you're reading out. But I like to think that generally I'm going to have an all right day, and hopefully we're going to have a good day on more times than not. Nice. In Europe, just out of interest, like what did you just go over by yourself? Did you go over with teammates? How did that all work out? Yeah, so about halfway through this domestic season, I started chatting to Sean Whip, and with the idea of let's try and get over to Europe and see what can happen. And fortunately, he looks after a couple other guys both here in New Zealand, and so he kind of paired me up with James Preston, Kiwi 800-meter runner. And sort of thought we'd be a good pair for the European campaign. So he got us in touch, and we ended up just planning a trip together. So I lived with him in Leuven in Belgium for 2 months of the 3 months that I was away. And it was actually really nice because both Preston and I ended up at team camp in Montpellier, obviously him for New Zealand, myself for Australia, and then at the same hotel in Budapest as well. So, we spent quite a bit of time together over the last 3 months.
Nice, man. And I take it like, it's not, I don't think there's any secrets that like a couple months in Europe's pretty expensive ordeal. So like, obviously you've had a pretty expensive year, I take it.
Yeah, certainly. Fully self-funded, and this is the year we are trying to jump that gap from just being a bloke who runs on the domestic circuit to getting overseas. So certainly felt the sting of 3 months abroad. I was fortunate enough to be on leave with a bit of pay for some of it, and ticked over to leave without pay towards the end. But that leave without pay kind of lined up with when we went into team camp and into Budapest. So expenditures went down, but yeah, certainly an expensive campaign for myself.
What do you do for work?
Like a good Canberran, mate, work in the public service, working for the government. So just in a small agency under the Department of Health.
Nice. Let's get to World Champs. Obviously, the heats are brutal. The 800 meter heats at World Champs Olympics, I mean, they're absolutely brutal, aren't they? And you obviously probably already knew that, but then you found out you got to live it, which not many of us do. And how was it? Obviously, I know you posted on Instagram that it was something special, and you took a lot from it. What do you have to say, kind of, from that experience, what you've learned?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so much. Being fortunate to represent your country is one of the highest honors, ever, and fortunate to have experienced something that's a small percentage of people will ever get to do. So I'm very proud of myself and the team for being able to say that we got to that level. Like all major events, there were some highs and some lows. Obviously, on my race itself, you're not progressing out of the heats, and sort of the performance on the day fell a little bit short of the expectation that I had set for myself. And falling short of your expectations on any day is a little bit hard to digest, but doing that with your country across the chest just hurts a little bit more. So was certainly sort of felt all the highs and lows around that, but reflecting on the experience as a whole, certainly an overall overwhelming positive. It was my first time on the big stage. First time experiencing pre-departure camp. It's the first time I've ever had 2 call rooms to go to with a golf buggy trip in between. I had the defending world champ, Olympic medalist, Commonwealth Games medalist in my heat, and just seeing how those guys go about their prep and how they sort of get in the mindset to race is all learning, going through the motions and seeing some of the best guys that Australia has to offer as well, how they're go about their days in the team hotel in the days leading up to their races. There's just so much there. I tried to be good and got a fair bit of journaling done sort of while I was over there, trying to write something at least every day or every couple of days. So, once sort of the dust settles on this season, I've got a good bank of stuff to be able to go back and reflect and read and learn and apply moving forward.
Nice. Did you get to, do any training with Bowl and Deng or not so much?
Those guys got into the hotel a little bit later. They were both kind of doing their own prep elsewhere. So unfortunately, we didn't see them in Montpellier, but certainly absorbed as much as I could once they got into Budapest. And JR, their coach, was in Montpellier, and I can't thank him enough for the support that he provided me during that time. Des, my coach, wasn't able to travel, and JR is just mad about athletics, mate. He was, I reckon, on that track from sun up till sundown on the bike with a stopwatch in his hand, just bouncing between people's workouts and helping them. So it's so good to see people like him in the sport that just love the sport and care about the sport and are just willing to help people, so selflessly all day, every day in an environment like that.
Awesome, mate. Yeah, let's talk about your coach, Des. A lot of people probably haven't heard much about Des. So tell me a little bit about him and your history personally as well with him.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, we're in Canberra, ACT. Sometimes we feel a little bit out of the loop, in the grand scheme of athletics here in cold old Canberra, but Canberra itself's a beautiful place to train, and lucky enough to be the place where Desi's based as well. So look, I came into the sport pretty late. I picked it up competitively at 21, and so I had reached out to Jared Ryan, who is another probably familiar name for ACT runners and Australian runners, because I'd done a tiny little bit of work with him through high school, competing on cross teams through high school just as a bit of a side hobby, and he got me in touch with Des. So funnily enough, I'm not sure if Des actually knows this story, but the idea of me joining up with him was to get a little bit of sort of pre-season fitness in before probably going to play footy, AFL here in Canberra, because I'd come from a background of no sport at all. But it just happened to be the summer, and so there was no AFL being played. So I thought I'll go join a running group and get a little bit of pre-season in, and then when it becomes winter, I'll go and play some footy. But just ran track that summer. Really good training group, really clicked with Des, and I just never left. And things have worked out pretty well since then. But look, like most people in athletics in Australia, he works full time. Coaching is a bit of passion project, but that hasn't stopped Des and our team sort of achieve great things. Obviously, Leanne Pompiani, product of Des Proctor as well. We've just had Zoe Buckman jump over to our group as well. So we're definitely not short of inspirational people to look around with our group here in Canberra. But at the same time, Des is heavily still a recreational coach in the sense that we'll have 30, 40 high school kids and professionals and everybody in between coming out to train at Stromlo, on any given Thursday. So,
like, Canberra definitely doesn't have a lack of quality groups, hey?
No, there's no shortage of talent at the moment. When you think of, I guess, distance running in Canberra, the big three are probably Des, you got Dick Telford's group, and of course Philo Saunders' group. So there's no shortage of talented runners to mix it up with here.
Just seems like if you're a kid, 18, and you're trying to figure out where to live, I mean, it just seems like such an easy place to live compared to, say, a Sydney, to get to train and stuff, right? But anyway, diverging there. I found this funny thread on Let's Run, just doing a little bit of pre-podcast listening and research, and the first post says, apparently Riley, they want to know about your background. Apparently Riley ran only 149 last season and took up running at 21. He used to be a classy soccer player. Is this true? What has been his running background since he started? And then the next comment was, to be fair, he only had to beat Charlie Hunter. I mean, thought that was a bit harsh, but it was there's not much info about you out there. Did you run at all at high school or not so much?
Yeah, so I was a soccer player through high school. I played that up until year 10, which is, 16 or 17 years old. Coming from the ACT, national cross-country teams are a little bit easier, or state cross-country teams to go to nationals are a little bit easier to get on because of our small pool of athletes. So I did national cross in year 7, 8, 9, and 10, just as kind of a little, couple of days off school. Soccer was the main focus for sure. So I had a little bit of exposure to running, but it was always secondary to soccer. And I thought that I was an okay runner because of how much soccer I was playing. But now, being able to look and reflect, I was probably an okay soccer player because of the running sort of talent or engine that I had. But yeah, certainly hadn't tapped into it until I picked up the sport properly, a couple of years later. But yeah, so soccer as a junior, and then spent about 3 or 4 years away from competitive sport until I fell into running back in 2017, I think was my first summer working with Des.
Right. But I take it you're a gun runner, like, compared to pretty much all the other soccer players, right?
Well, I was a winger. I don't think I was actually that talented at soccer, but my coach could put me out on the wing and I could just run all day. So I was able to compete at a reasonably high level, but certainly wasn't very tactically or technically sound. But I had a bit of speed and could just run on the park all day.
Gotcha. I presume over the last 4 years then you haven't raced heaps like at other events, right? Like, there's no 1500 PB down here for you on World Athletics. Have you ever run a 1500?
I've entered one.
Yeah. Sorry.
I've paced a local 1500, did a shocking job. And I look in that sort of 5 or 6 years between kicking off athletics and getting here, I probably spent a year and a half thinking I was a 400-meter runner. So I joined a sprint group and focused on that for a year and a half. I didn't run anything too impressive. I think I got down to 48.3, which is certainly nothing special. And my body just hated it. I got injured quite a bit, a lot of load-related injuries. And I found that holding on to my fitness through cross training, which I had to do when I was injured, it was just a bit easier to be sort of a mid-distance guy. It's a lot easier to cross train aerobically than it is to cross train and try and keep your fitness for basically a sprint event. Cool. So look, I'd certainly love to run a 1500 or a mile just to get a time on the board and see what I could do. But yeah, you kind of got to pick your opportunities now, and certainly don't want to be sacrificing an opportunity to run a good 800 just to try 15, but definitely open to trying.
The progression has been very steady, right? Like in the COVID year, 220, you ran 6 times, and it was pretty much 157, 157, then 153s and a 154. 2021, you raced a bit more. You dropped the PB 149 that year. All of the other runs around 152. And then 222, you were still around the 149, didn't really kick on that year. And then a few 153s, 151, 150, and then 2023, boom, you take 3 seconds off and have a bit of a breakthrough year. So it's just like, it's kind of like your body just needed 3 years of hammering out those races and kind of making small progress, and then it allowed you to take a big step forward. Is that accurate?
I think so. Every year you expect to get a little bit better, and it was certainly an adjustment getting into the sport and learning how to train at a high level. I think I got a bit robbed last year. I finished the season pretty disappointed to have only dropped my PB by half a second or something. I think I went from a 149 high to a 149 low in 2022, and I thought that I was probably in a better shape than what I eventually ran, and I'm sure everybody says that their PB might not justify the shape that they were in, but I didn't race any track classics that year. I scraped in, and I think I ran my PB in the B race at the Sydney Track Classic, so I just didn't have the opportunity to really spin the wheels, and I'm not the type of runner that can get at the front and just crank it from the gun. I tend to sit in a little bit more and try and finish really strong. So we maybe made some errors that year with picking races as well. I was sort of traveling around and front running negative split in 149s like it was no issue, but just could not get that breakthrough. So certainly felt like I had something to prove the following year, which has been this year just past not being able to lower the PB too well last year.
Yeah.
I think it's worked out well.
What's how does Des train you? Is he 800 meter training? Obviously, it's it's an interesting area, right? Like I think most 1500 and 5000 meter runners train pretty similar, but there's a lot of variation 800 training. Guys like Luke Matthews who do massive volume, and then the other end of the spectrum, just pure speed guys. Where do you sit? How does Des train you?
Annoyingly, I'm probably somewhere right in the middle. So I'm certainly not a speed-based guy. We still try and get in, 70K a week, or what have you, for most of the year. So I'm certainly not a pure speed-based guy, but I'm also not the guy that can tolerate 100, 110Ks per week. So I kind of do sit in the middle. We're a pretty standard training split, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday workouts, long run on a Sunday, and so a bit of easy jogging and maybe some additional cross training in between. When the summer rolls around, shorten up the long run and add in a bit of speed work on a Monday. I think there's a big chunk of us kind of doing the same thing now. I don't think there's any real secrets about sort of what we're doing, and there's certainly, I don't feel that we're doing anything different or anything special. We just turn up, we train smart, and just try and stay on the park, I think, is the biggest difference. It's like every sport. You just need to practice it. You just need to get better at it. And it's pretty hard to do that when you're on the sidelines with an injury. So Des, I would say, is probably on the more conservative end of the coaching sort of scale. We don't absolutely rip it 3 days a week, every week for 52 weeks of the year. We pick and choose our days when we're going to go hard. But the overarching principle is just keep turning up, get the work done, tick it over, and good things will come from that consistency.
Right. So you're doing track work on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, like in the middle of winter when you're building your base. Are you still Tuesday, Thursdays on the track, or are they elsewhere?
No, so really only 1 day a week on the track, particularly over the winter. That might increase over the summer or when we're racing and getting ready to race. But over the winter, try and get off the track. This is actually the first year that Des and myself have trained past nationals. So because we've not had to do a European season or a world major before. So that was all uncharted territories. What happens after nationals? How do you get back in good shape then with the time that you have? So that was a bit of a learning curve, how we navigate being on the track or giving the body a rest and off the track. But no, we do a lot of over the winter base work, is some long progressive runs, long hilly runs, plenty of threshold work. But we're super fortunate here in Canberra having Stromlo. It's got to be one of the best running facilities in Australia, if not the world. It's so good, and to have that as our kind of home court is just incredible. So we're on that a couple times a week, and certainly trying to give the body a bit of a rest over the winter off the track.
How are you at the threshold work? I mean, what kind of would be, when you're fit in the middle of winter and blah, blah, what would be kind of your threshold pace for a certain session?
Yeah, look, it's never been a strength of mine. So if I'm at reasonable fitness, I'm pretty happy to run sort of over the rolling, hills at Stromlo. Sort of 3:15 pace is 3:15 to 3:20 for a slightly longer sort of threshold. It's never been one of my strengths, like I said, but it is a good indication of when I start to get a bit of fitness, because I tend to enjoy it more. When I'm coming off my break or over the next couple of weeks, I'm probably going to hate it. But I know that when I start to mentally enjoy threshold work is when I start to get a little bit fit or fitter, because you can kind of find a groove and you can roll with it. We got a really good group of guys to train with here in Canberra as well. And if we can all kind of match up our fitness and get a nice train, then those long threshold sessions kind of just click themselves off.
Sydney Track Classic this year, you came out, and I think that was where you did your PB, is that right?
Yeah, correct.
It was I remember watching it, and I think, oh man, I can't quite remember, but coming into the home straight, it was crowded and you were kind of boxed, and then it opened up and you just squeezed through, right? I just remember thinking, shit, man, that was pretty lucky that you got through, but it was a really, really good win. That's got to be up, is that when you started realizing, hey, this is real,
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I was in last position coming around the last bend. So I definitely made it hard for myself. But I just felt super comfortable that entire race, and knew that I had something that was going to be a special day. Like the warm up just felt so right. The strides felt good. Standing on the start line felt incredible. And I knew I was going to have a day. And that's, I think the feeling is that we crave as runners, is to try and replicate that as many times as we can, because it's so hard to describe when you're going to have a day. So luckily, yeah, that one was for me, and was in, I think, about last position or second last coming around the bend, and just kind of got to work down the home straight and was lucky enough to be able to thread the needle. I actually ran up the inside on the rail. I don't think they'll ever let me do that again. But just had a nice sort of thread the needle through there, and got through. Charlie Hunter was pushing really, really hard. It probably looked like he was going to get the win a little bit earlier on of the home straight, but was able to come through nice and strong. And yeah, after that, I was kind of like, let's go. This is the year that we can make something special happen. So that filled me with a lot of confidence. Was able to get a track classic win under my belt.
They're elusive, those days where you just feel like magic, right? And I hear funny stories of people when they have a day like that and they go back over kind of the 3 weeks leading into it and try and copy exactly what everything they did, in the training and sleep and life and all that sort of stuff. Have you looked back over the weeks leading into that race, to see what you did with, say, for example, just your taper? You know, did you have a massive taper leading into that race, or not, or did you hardly taper at all?
Yeah, look a little bit. It's right in the thick of racing. You know, I'd done Adelaide Track Classic. I'd done the Maury Plant meet just before that, so we're kind of in the thick of it and just getting in a really nice groove of racing, but still being able to keep our loads up. I think Des did a really good job of programming between our races this domestic season, like a really good job. You know, I spent all of January up at Perisher, and you come off the mountain generally a little bit busted up, and he just did a great job at turning me around for Adelaide. And then still a little bit busted up going into Melbourne. We nailed that build and that little sort of week or so taper, and then coming off Maury Plant meet and going into Sydney, you know, he just nailed it again. Just in terms of giving me the right amount of work, but not too much. Come in fresh at the right time. I just got to give all credit to him with how we approached that. I just could not think of anything that we did better. We still like to get a bit of work. Let's say we're racing on a Saturday. We still like to get a good bit of work done on the Tuesday leading into it. And then Thursday is kind of where we might take the foot off the gas a little bit and generally come good by Saturday.
Nice. Let's talk about Perisher for a bit. I know a bunch of 800 coaches that kind of don't really take their athletes to altitude. But we were chatting to James Templeton a month or so ago, and he was saying how much Pete Bowl loves going up to St. Moritz and spending time up there because it gets him super fit. And obviously you just said you love Perisher. So what do you do? Like at Perisher, are you still doing your speed work? Because it's kind of pretty close to the season. You're obviously not going up there and just banging out mileage and thresholds and stuff, right? Like you're doing a little bit of speed and intensity. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think the best thing that you can do when you go to altitude is probably just keep doing what you've been doing. Like that, being up at altitude in and of itself is an extra stress on the body. And I think the biggest mistake people do is go to altitude and try and train the house down and do different things and more than what they've been doing. So when I think of how my season's going to play out, you know, between now and December or January, I'm just trying to get as fit as I possibly can so that when I get to Perisher, I can train hard there and reap the rewards. But yeah, we're certainly not going up there and making heaps of changes. We're just trying to keep the ball rolling, but we're up at altitude, getting a little bit of extra stress on the body there. As many people know, the track up at Jindabyne there is not too crash hot, so we got to be a little bit careful about absolutely reaping it on that track. In fact, if I'm not feeling 100%, I'll prefer to just stay up at Perisher and get a workout done on the trail there because it is pretty taxing on that track there. So, yeah, it's just about being smart. I feel like I do get a lot of benefit from it, even as an 800 guy. A lot of benefit from heading up there. And it's also just about being away with your mates and being able to focus on running. Half of the benefit, irrelevant of the altitude, you're away, you're on a focused training camp, you're eating well because you're there spending money to be there. I think you get a lot of benefit just out of that alone. You can put your feet up during the day, you can get to bed early, you can do all the right things. So of course you're going to make some improvements as an athlete in an environment like that.
Obviously, it's an Olympic year next year, which is based on what you just pulled off at making the world champs team. It's pretty exciting for you. Are you gonna head back to Perisher? Is it going to be the same kind of model, training model that you've just kind of come off, and you're just going to repeat that?
Yeah, I think we don't need to make too many changes. We just another year of training and racing. Hopefully we'll continue to get a little bit better. Certainly look to go to Perisher again over the early summer. You kind of hit the nail on the head. Things worked for us in this year just past, so why would we go ahead and make all these changes? Certainly going to have to lift the bar a little bit over the next year. They're taking a slightly smaller field size into the men's 800 at Paris. We had 56 at Budapest. It's fallen down to 48 in Paris. And, you look at the Australian team alone, there's only one spot left because Pete and Joe both have their timed qualifiers. So, or the auto standard rather. So, look, it's going to be tough. We're going to have to find ways to raise the bar again. But it's certainly, I feel, a reality for me. And that's something that I've learned and reflected on making the my first Worlds team this year is training towards a lofty goal like the Paris Olympics isn't out of the question. Why the bloody hell not?
There's quite a few boys knocking on that door for that kind of third spot, isn't there? There's, Jack Lunn, obviously, Lockie Raper, Jai Perrott, bunch of others, which I'm not going to list everyone, but there's some decent names that are all kind of around about that same point, right? And it's kind of mouthwatering, get 8 or 9 of those guys in the national final. It's going to be pretty epic.
It is. There's a lot of hungry guys at the moment, and like I said, only one spot left. We've got a really good crop of guys domestically, and you got Charlie Hunter over in the States, who's a guy that could turn up on any given weekend and run that 144.7 and solidify his spot there. So it is going to be a very fun domestic campaign. See how it all plays out. Lunny's coming off a PB. He ran 145 high at that Vienna race that I was in as well. Got a good seat in that race. Tucked in behind him, watching him go ahead and run a PB. And Luke Boy's World Uni rep this year, so he's going to come out hungry. Ben Liddy's guys out of Sydney there are always consistently a problem for all the other 800 guys. They're hungry, they're quick, they know how to train smart. Jamie Harrison had a breakout year last year as well. It's just it's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of guys knocking on that door.
I think Liddy runs a pretty tight ship, hey?
He does. He's a good man, a brilliant coach. I got to give thanks to him as well. He was over in Europe a little bit as well. And like I said, Des wasn't able to travel. So there's a couple of guys that sort of helped out probably more than they know throughout my European campaign. And Liddy's one of those. He was there a little bit early on. So just having blokes like that at meets when your coach isn't there, they help immensely. And he's got a lot of talent in that squad, a lot of good guys, and he knows how to coach them well. So, little bit nervous for how those guys are going to run next year for sure.
I think if you're an 800 runner and you want to live in Sydney, then Liddy is that man at the moment, isn't he? Just like kind of, obviously Melbourne has Renati and Canberra has Des, but yeah, it's interesting how each major kind of centre at the moment has that leading 800 coach. Just quickly, I know that you've punched a bunch of weights over the years. I was reading some article how you were just massively huge, and then you had to shed it. Are you still lifting, or is it just a little bit these days?
Look, just to stay injury free and support my running. It's a long way from my past of that was kind of all I did for a couple of years there. I was just your typical gym goer. But no, now it's all.
Sorry, you must have been top heavy as hey, just tiny.
I was
just massive upper body.
Yeah, a little bit top heavy for sure. Even when I came and saw Des, and even that first sort of year or two of running, was not a pretty sight for me. Getting around in the local B race in the local summer series here in Canberra, it was not a pretty sight.
What was your 800 of all time? What did you do? It was 210.
I was running 210 to my very, very first one. I ran 216. And then I think I maybe got that down to 204 in my first year, but it was not pretty. And even worse, there's not a whole lot of people. Athletics isn't massive in the ACT. So when I'm in the B race, it's well and truly me against 11, 12, 13-year-old kids. So had to put the pride aside for a little bit and think about the long-term goals there.
That's awesome.
But yeah, thankfully the body's coming around to understanding what I'm asking of it these days. I still think I'm a little bit on the top heavy side when you look at the other guys getting around the track. Probably still a touch heavy, but it seems to be working, and I just got to trust that the body's going to do and hold on to what it needs and what it wants, and it'll cooperate.
It's been awesome chatting to you. Good luck for the massive year ahead of you, and all the best with it. Hope you can build and have another breakthrough and get sub 145.
Appreciate that, mate. That's the goal. That's the target. And hopefully we can get there. Cheers, mate.
Awesome.